All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Jewish Mysticism Lessons in Tanya, chapter 22, or the third lesson in highest consciousness. And the title of this week's lesson is Denying That God is Within You. And it's really a continuation of a discussion that we started for the first two chapters of highest consciousness, which is trying to find a deeper meaning within the first two of the Ten Commandments, and which we're going to pick up that conversation in just a moment. The page number for this week is page 247 in the Tanya, and in the handout we are on the handout for chapter 22. Again, denying that God is within you. And in chapter 20, which was the beginning of highest consciousness, we started off by discussing. So the source of our discussion was a famous Zohar, which says that every mitzvah is included within the first two. Right? All the 611 other commandments are included within the first two. Right? Anochi, or the first commandment, which commands us to believe in one God, is the source of all positive commandments. Right? Any dues. Lo yeh, or lo yeh lecha elokim acherim, which means there should not be unto you any other gods. You shouldn't. Right? The prohibition against idol worship is the second of the Ten Commandments, and that sort of includes within it all of the negative commandments, all the don'ts that there are in the rest of the Torah. And in order to understand this, we said, let's try to understand a little bit more about what these commandments actually are, right? A little bit on a deeper level. It's obviously not just, let's start with it. It obviously is, right? Like the famous message, which means no verse is ever taken out of its simplistic meaning. The literal meaning is an explanation as well. But there's also an underlying thought here. And the underlying thought behind the oneness of Hashem, we explained in chapter 21, or last week's lesson, where we spoke about the fact that Hashem being one doesn't just mean that there are no other gods. It also means realizing that the creation of the world had no change in the oneness of Hashem. In other words, to us, the fact that there's Hashem and there's pre-creating the world and post-creating the world and us being created, it's all because we're so part of this world that we can't imagine an existence without it.
We know nothing else beside it.
Right. Show of hands, anybody ever watched the movie Interstellar?
Interstellar?
Yeah, you did watch it? Gives you a headache. Okay, now whatever. But it's a movie. It's from that director who does all the hard thinking movies. He directed The Dark Knight Rises, and a couple of other movies like that. I forgot. Christopher something. Whatever. The point is, the movie actually challenges some of these concepts of the reality that we exist in, and thinking about other realities that there are outside of our reality.
Do you know who was the stars in that movie? Maybe I saw it.
I don't remember.
You don't remember?
You did see it?
Interstellar.
Interstellar. It's about a guy. It's so complicated. It's always so complicated. It's about a guy who goes. It's in a post NASA world where NASA was cut off or something, and then they send him they're trying to find a loop, a warp, a time warp, and whatever. But basically it does a lot of a wormhole, yeah, a loop in time, whatever it is. But basically, it does a lot of challenging to our notions of time, and let's try to imagine a world without time. Let's try to imagine a world without space. Let's try to imagine a world, right, where there's another dimension in addition to the dimensions that we know, right? These kinds of ideas. And while, of course, it's a movie and it's fictitious, etc., but obviously the point that he's trying to point out is that we can do some thinking beyond our own reality, right? So I wouldn't say that he tied into what Tanya is saying in chapter 21, but definitely chapter 21 of Tanya challenges us. Let's try to think a little bit more of the world from a godly perspective, not just from an us perspective. We're so confined within the realities of the limits of the world, the finite creation of the world, not just time and space, right, but also just things existing before us and after us, etc., that we're convinced that everything must revolve around us. And everything must revolve around the world. And I think Tanya, in the previous chapter, challenges that and says, maybe let's try to look at it from a godly perspective. And let's try to realize that the world doesn't even really exist to God. I mean, to God, the world is just a further expression of Him. And that nothing changed from before and after He created the world, except that we were granted the ability or the potential to perceive our own existence, to perceive the world as being something, etc. that make sense?
Capacity. No?
Okay. So in chapter 22, we're going to break down Lo Yiyeh, the second one of the Ten Commandments. In other words, do not believe in any other false gods. Do not serve any idol worship. Right? Which, if the ultimate and the deepest level of believing in Hashem is believing that everything is Hashem, Ein od milvado, as the Zohar says, right? So then the ultimate of believing, in other words, of going against that belief, the ultimate of denying God's existence will be pumping ourselves up. Right? Will be our own ego becoming more and more of an existence to ourselves, becoming more and more of a thing, us thinking more and more that we, or anything, having a perception or a feeling that they exist and that God's existence might be lessened somehow by their existence. Okay, so that's going to be the deeper level of can somebody pass one of the Tanyas that are the libraries for Elise? Right, Elise, do you have one? Do you have your Tanya with you?
No.
Okay, no problem. We'll pass one now. Right, that's going to be the ultimate of idol worship. Right, that's going to be the deeper meaning of idol worship. Okay, fine. Without further ado, let's dive right into it. In chapter 22, he takes us back to the analogy of speech. Everybody remember that analogy? And just to remind us why this is so key, it's because it's not an analogy that the Zohar or the Medrash or that the Talmud or anybody like that introduces. It goes all the way back to the 5 books of Moses, right to the beginning of the first book. Right? It says God spoke and He created the world. Right? Now, obviously, when we introduced this already last week, God's speech is not like our speech. So God speaking and the world coming into being is obviously some sort of analogy. And the question is, and then we went on to explain how bad of an, or at least some of the vices that there are in this analogy. The question is, if it's so bad, or if there are so many things wrong with it, why does the Torah use it? Okay, and then if you're going to prove to me how good it is, then what's about the parts that are not good about the analogy, right? Like, so where does this, right? Where does this thing come from? And so the first thing I'll introduce is a quote from the Talmud in Berachot, the first volume of the Talmud, where the Talmud says, Dibra Torah kilashon b'nei Adam. Where is it? We're on page 248. The opening words of the chapter. Only the Torah speaks of God in human terms. Dibra Torah kilashon b'nei Adam. The Torah attempts always, whenever describing anything, to speak in manly terms. In other words, in human terms. And that's why the term speech is used for the creation of the world, because that's the most similar human function that creation can be compared to, because humans can't create, right? Humans cannot create. So the most comparable human function was speech. Right? So the question becomes, now we're stuck in a little bit of a catch-22. Anybody with me here? So you used it because it's the most similar, but it's not really perfect. But on the other hand, the Torah only tells us true things, right? Torah is Torah emet. Everything in Torah is 100% true. And if this was a parable given to us by some rabbi from the 18th century, so then we would say, great, no problem. So he's a man, right? Like all other men. And he used the analogy because it helps us to understand Hashem in certain ways, even though it might impair our understanding of Hashem in other ways. But it's worth it because these elements are true. But because the Torah itself telling us this parable, it must be 100% true. But on the other hand, to say that God spoke, which is such a humanistic term and such a human form and function, is also heresy, right? So we're a little bit stuck here between a rock and a hard place. Everybody with me? Mm-hmm. Let's read inside a little bit. Leo, you want to do some reading for us?
Sure, where from?
So we're on page 248.
Yeah.
The practical Tanya brings from the Avodas HaKodesh, which is Rabbi Meir ibn Gabbai. It's right on the left side of where it says practical lessons. The Kabbalists taught that anthropomorphic scriptural references to God's hand, God's eyes, etc. are symbols of a higher reality. And that's what we'll take over in just a moment. This is found throughout the Torah. Everybody with me? Meaning this issue that we're grappling with here, the fact that the Torah uses a very physical term about God, right? And yet Torah is a true Torah, so obviously God does have a hand. If the Torah says God has a hand, God has a hand, right? But on the other hand, there's so many things about a hand that are so not godly. So many things about a hand, I'm talking to a room that's only Tanya, so I can use, right? That's so finite, that's so limited. So how can that be referring to God in any way, right? So and this issue is found not just with regard to speech in the beginning of Torah when God spoke and created the world, but later on, right? Some famous verses that some of you will be familiar with, right? That God took the Jewish people out of Egypt. Anybody?
Biyad chazaka.
Very good. Biyad chazaka of Israel Netuya, with a mighty arm and with a mighty hand or a mighty fist and an outstretched arm, right? Okay. Then later on, the Egyptians say, Etzba Elokimhi, it's a finger of God, it's a hand of God, this is the work of God, right? Even though it's the Egyptians talking, but if the Torah is telling us this, then obviously it's 100% true, right? So what's going on here? How do we come to terms with the fact that this is so not true, and yet it has to be so true at the same time?
So we can understand it. So we can
Correct,
relate to it.
correct, but it has to be not just, that the Talmud already told us. The reason it's used, even though there might have been better things to use, is because we have to find something that's human. Something that a man can wrap his brain around, or a woman, right? But we're looking now not just, so that's the reason why we're using it. But how is it 100% true? What about the limiting factors of a hand, right?
It's limiting when we talk about our hand.
So this is the point that, so this point that you're saying, which you may have heard from other places, comes from Rabbi Meir ben Gabbai. Please share with us. Go ahead.
Okay. Rabbi Meir ben Gabbai writes, while the physical references to God in Scripture are not to be taken literally, they do nevertheless represent an extremely profound truth, describing how God's light flows outward from Him and reaches the creations. In fact, our physical features were created in the image of much higher qualities that are totally non-physical and which man cannot understand. Our organs are thus a reminder of the spiritual emanations above.
Okay, so on a very simplistic level, God relates with the world, right? God gives energy to the world. God gives light to the world. God gives whatever words you want to use for it. God has an interaction with the world. Whenever God has an interaction with the world, it's done in a different way, depending on what's being accomplished, depending on what we need at that point or whatever it is, right? The words in the Torah that seem so physical are just anchor words or descriptive words for those emanations or those energies that God shines upon the world. Okay, so then it's not true really, right? Because it's not a hand. It's really just an emanation from Hashem. Why do we use the term hand? Because as a matter of fact, that is a true hand. In other words, our hand down here and our hand up above are essentially the same, yet eternally different. Anybody ever been to Bangkok? Same, but different, right? So they are polar opposites of the spectrum of physicality and spirituality. By God, or let's take out the words physicality and spirituality. Polar opposites of the spectrum of infinity and finite. We have the most finite, which are essentially synonyms to physicality and spirituality. We have the most finite and mundane and defined version of it. And God has the most, all the opposite of those, right? The most infinite, the most refined, and the most non-mundane. What's the opposite of mundane, right? Version of that. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so they essentially are the same.
Sorry.
And now we come to what Irit sometimes quotes, which is the pasuk, which many Kabbalists will quote in Bereshit, in Genesis, which says, "B'tselem Elokim bara otam," right? Naseh Adam b'tzelmenu. God says He created man in His image. So what does that mean? Are we essentially all gods?
Yes.
On a certain level, yes. But for a moment here, let's focus on the fact that every organ, every emanation that we have with the world, every function, every way that we interact with the world is essentially a godly way, just contaminated to the lowest level, for lack of a better word. Obviously not contaminated. Contaminated is a strong word, but physicalized or what was that? Materialized or
influence?
Not influence, like it's made so coarse, right? It's made so physical and so
corrupted, maybe.
So that's what I said. Corrupt and contaminate are very harsh words, but essentially yes. How does that work? What happens in between? Right? What changes from when God has that same aspect and when we have that same aspect? What's the word? Anybody remember from last week? Very good. Tzimtzum. The diminishment, right? In other words, in order for God to create the world, in order for God to give us this reality where we essentially have all the godly components, the same components were created in the image of God, and yet our hand and His hand, 10 minutes ago we all agreed was preposterous to compare a physical hand to God's hand, right? And yet essentially they're from the same family, they're first cousins, they're maybe a great-great-grandchild, but they're from the same family. In order to do that, God had a tzimtzum. There were many different sort of coverings over on the light of Hashem. And that's how we got our physical hand. As a result, Rabbi Meir Gabai ends off with essentially, and this is a beautiful part about our body that you can think about, our organs are thus a reminder of the spiritual emanations above. Every time we see a certain way that or let's do it the other way. Every time we think about something about godliness that we cannot understand, look for something in your own life, whether it's a physical part of your life or an emotional part of your life or an intellectual part of your life, whatever it is, there is something that can help you understand that. Because essentially we have that maybe on a much lower level, but there's a comparison level there. To quote Job, who famously said, "Umi b'sari echze Eloka," from my flesh I see God. In other words, whenever I'm flustered and I can't figure it out, and I'm trying to connect with God, and how could I turn inward? Turn inward. You were given the best guide or the best map to godliness. Except that they're on two completely different planes.
So can we say we can elevate our understanding?
One second. I'm sorry for cutting you off. The next section, one of the topics we're going to discuss is how do we bridge that gap? How do we bridge that divide? How do we try to be more godly or less mundane and finite and all of those words, right? All those. How are we less that way? Okay? So it's important. So before we get there, in section 2, he starts with the root of evil. Right? The tzimtzum, this concept, whatever it is, that right, because there's many tzimtzumim we discussed. There's many diminishments and coverings over on God's light, etc. That happens throughout. That tzimtzum that happens in between, somewhere where there's the godly hand and then there's our hand, or there's a godly speech and then there's our speech. That essentially is the root of all evil. Why? Because by evil we literally mean evil. By the way, we literally mean Kalipa. Remember? Anybody remember from chapter 6, 7 when we discussed the fact that there's a shell that covers over on the fruit, and that there's these sources of negative energy around the world. They come because of tzimtzum. In other words, they cannot exist without this diminishment. For those who don't remember, right? Tzimtzum. The word tzimtzum is a Hebrew word which means diminishment. In other words, it refers to the fact that somewhere along the way God sort of concealed His light in order to let us have an existence. Right? As discussed at length last week. Right, to make space for us. So another word for klipa is called Elokim Achirim. The Zohar calls klipa Elokim Achirim, which means other gods in English. Right? Anybody see where this is leading now? We're getting back to the second commandment. Everybody with us? Why?
Don't pay attention.
Because what?
Don't pay attention to that.
Oh, of course, don't pay attention to that. Right? But why? Why is klipa called other gods? Because essentially, the difference between a physical hand and a spiritual and a godly hand, the difference between Elokim Achirim, other gods, and God, what is the whole difference between them? Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is that, what we said, making space for existence. It's the only way that they can survive. Why? Because what is klipa? Klipa is, I found some good words when I was writing the bullet points. Where is it? Here, the second bullet point in number 4, right? Klipa is all about raise me up, haughtiness, give me more, me. I exist, right? I am end all, and it wants more and more from godliness. The problem is that klipa at its very existence is godliness. So why does it need so much more godliness? Why does it need so much more? And if it's the opposite of godliness, why does it need to connect to God? Anybody as confused as I am? So this is where this illustration of the point, again, from a physical reality in our lives comes. Right? Anybody ever parents in the room? Of more than one child? Anybody have more than one child? Mm-hmm. Yeah? 2 kids fighting, right? They're fighting over a Game Boy or something. And then you have to come be the judge, okay? Sometimes you get it right, sometimes you don't, whatever. But you tell one kid he gets to have the Game Boy, and the other kid happens to have the Game Boy in his hand. Baron, you want to demonstrate for us how he gives the Game Boy to him?
Like pulling it back and fighting?
No. Okay, so they come to you, they have a fight.
Yeah.
It's my turn. Okay, let's say you have no clue, so you just choose a random one. You tell him, it's your turn. I remember it's your turn, right? And he has the Game Boy in his hand. Now he has to give it back to him. How does he give it back?
Unwillingly.
Very good illustration. Arnold, do you want to do that again? Can I do one even better? He turns around, he doesn't even want to look at him. He takes it, he throws it over his shoulder at him. Anybody? This is the analogy that Tanya gives for the source of energy for Klippa. Why? Because, ladies and gentlemen, remember that this world, as we introduced in last week's lesson, is all godliness. Nothing in this world can exist if there isn't godliness that pulsates through it at every moment. Right? So how do we end up with something that godliness pulsates through it, and yet it denies godliness? Obviously, even it is godliness. Right? There has to be some sort of godly energy, otherwise it would cease to exist. There is nothing besides for God. Right? So Klippa needs godliness. But let me ask you a question, simple question. And many people come with this question emotionally to a rabbi. So why does God allow it to exist? Does God want evil in the world?
No.
Right? Why do bad things happen to good people? Does God want evil to exist in the world? No. So then why does it exist? If everything in this world is godliness, how could it even exist? If God is infinite and God runs the whole world and that he's the director of the ship and the captain of the guard, right? So then, and not only that, it needs actual godliness to be. So then how could it exist?
But it's like the wrong concept of God.
So here's where Tanya explains that on a certain level you have to say that God does want it to exist. But Tanya introduces the fact that many of us have internal desires and external desires. In other words, we have desires that are connected to our essence. This is something I really want. And then we have things, whether they're byproducts or they're other elements, but they're a desire of God, but they are an external desire of God. In this case, God wants the world to exist. Not only does God want the world to exist, God wants there to be good and evil. He needs there to be a choice. Right? He needs a human being to be able to look at the world and say that these two things are. I could easily do the good thing and the bad thing, the right thing and the wrong thing, and I don't know which one to choose. And therefore, I'm forced to consult my inner compass, etc. Which is, again, we've gotten to, which is the purpose of creation. That a person then uses that to make that choice and chooses the right thing. Right? We had it in not last week's parasha, 2 weeks ago's parasha. Right? See, I have put before you today the good and the bad, the life and death, and you should choose life. You should choose the good thing. That's the purpose of creation. Okay, great. So now, in order for that choice to be real, evil needs to exist. Right? But evil needs to exist the same way your son needs to give the Game Boy back to the other one. God is almost forced by himself. He's forced to create evil. I need to do it. I need to do it because it's part of the plan and it works, and I need to have the bad and the good together like that. There should be a proper choice. There should be a proper equilibrium in the world, etc., etc. Right? But I don't want it to exist. That's not what I want. I want a Jew to choose the right thing. And every time a Jew chooses the wrong thing, God has an infinite amount of grief. Right? When a Jew chooses the right thing, infinite amount of pleasure. But he needs that evil to exist. And as a result, it exists, but it is, in the words of the Tikkun Zohar. Who is it?
Oh, thank you.
It says if he throws it over his shoulder. I think it's the Tikkun Zohar. As one who gives it, command the shadda basaksid, like someone who throws it over his shoulder. Here, take it. Like throwing it to the dogs. As a result, it's the lowest form of godly energy that there can be in the world. Right? Let's think of the highest form, right? The godly energy that gives life to the Holy of Holies in the Holy Temple, or whatever it is, the holiest place, or the holiest person on earth, or the holiest action on earth, right? So there's a godly energy that energizes that. That's the most close to God energy. And this is the most distant from God. This is God on his lowest level.
It's only a hint of godliness.
In other words, there's like this contaminated, corrupted, whatever you want to call it, version of godliness that it's living off.
I don't like that.
Great. Don't associate yourself with it. 1 second. 1 second. Here's the problem. What's Klippa? Klippa is give me more. Klippa is me. So Klippa is not satisfied with that version of godliness. So where does Klippa find more godliness? You tell me. Where do we find more godliness in the world? In holy people. In holy acts. Right? In holy places. So Klippa tries to find ways to latch on and get access to more godliness. One of the most bountiful and plentiful and beautiful sources of godly energy is a Jew. So Klippa comes to a Jew and says, here you are, beautiful source of godly energy. I want you to do something that God doesn't want to do. Do something that I'm telling you to do that's against the will of Hashem, that ties more in with your ego than it does with Hashem. get angry at someone, do something terrible, right? Every time a Jew does that, what was the term we used weeks and weeks ago, right? Months and months ago, when we were first discussing the concept of evil and the fact when a Jew chooses the wrong thing, what does he do? He gives energy to Klippa. He makes the tzimtzum more of a reality. Essentially, and if this is not heretical to say, he conceals godliness. Or, in the words of the second commandment, he serves idolatry. Right? Section 3. That's what section 3 is. Section 4, I apologize. The psychology of idolatry. That's what's going on here. Right? When a Jew says, I am going to serve other gods, as the Tikkun Zohar calls Klippa, calls the forces of negativity, essentially, anytime a Jew says to himself, and right, because we're looking for how don't serve idols, and idolatry is essentially the source of all negative commandments. Anytime a Jew does something that God says don't do, what is he doing? He's pumping up his own ego and he's putting down God. He's saying this is a space that's godless and me full. Right? And what does God say about that? We can't both live in the same space. If you're taking up so much space, I can't be there, says God. Kli reka machzik, an empty vessel, can accept godliness into it, but kli maleina machzik, the Talmud in Megillah, in Sukkah, I'm sorry. A full vessel, right? Bring me a cup full of water, and you say, I would like some l'chaim. I can't put any l'chaim in it, your cup is full. I'm just practical examples from the Kiddush of Chabad. If your cup is full, there's no space for me. God says, you have made no space for me in your life. It's you. So I'll get out of the way. Essentially, every time a Jew chooses his own ego over godliness, right? And this is famously, we know this already from the first few chapters of Tanya, that how do we connect with God? How do we allow godliness to our lives? Anybody? The Hebrew word or the English word?
Mitzvah.
A mitzvah, or what's the emotional feeling or the emotional work behind that? In Hebrew, it's bittul, nullifying ourselves, submitting ourselves, making space for God. Get rid of your ego for a second. Do something for someone else, for God, for something other than the fulfillment of your own ego or your own existence. Because that's klippa.
Receive for the sake of sharing. That's why.
Again?
Receive for the sake of sharing.
Opposite. Share for the sake of sharing.
But
and then
well, I want to say, if somebody,
your life is more godly.
People say that there is no God. Many people say, and they are right. In their life, there is no God because they took him really.
So the actual answer to that is that no, you can never really get rid of godliness from your life. Why? Because even klippa at its source is godliness. Yes, but they've pushed him out on a certain level that it's all me. Right, so klippa is desired by God, but it's in this backwards way.
It's almost out of no choice.
Right, and
I have to give something.
And that's why, for the rest of klippa's span in this world, it's attempting to suck out of any holiness or Jewish source or holy source or whatever it is.
It's interesting that it's almost as if Hashem is giving himself the opportunity
to be pushed out. 100%. Back to what we said. What is the root of evil? Why does God create evil? Because he wants to give that opportunity for lack of Hashem to exist. As a matter of fact, that was the feat of creating this world. Why did God not stop with the angelic worlds or the spiritual worlds that precede our physical world? God wanted a physical world. The motive was, the goal was, create a world where somebody can deny me, which was a tremendous feat. But it was done. Now we can choose to deny God, not just in the sense of saying that there's no God in the world, but much more importantly in the sense of doing actions throughout our lives that deny godliness in our lives. Right? Everybody with me? Everybody on the same page as me? Mm-hmm. Now we get to some simple statements that all mean, well, more like very deep statements that become very simple to us when we approach them now. The Talmud in Sota, for instance, says, I forgot the exact words, but that inflated ego, when someone is so full of themselves, that is avodah zarah, that is idolatry.
Rasha, ratzon shel atzmo.
No. There's a statement in Talmud and Sota. I can find this. I'll try to quote it. 1 second. There's a couple of quotes. Join me here on page 253, section 4. The psychology of idolatry. right? Yirmiyah, Jeremiah, one of the prophets, refers to klipa as high as an eagle, saying there's me and there's no one else besides me. That's from Isaiah. These are all terms that are used to refer to ego or to klipa, etc. Paro, which was during his time, he was the epitome of all klipa. He said, "The river is mine, and I have made myself." Right? Oh, here it is. And the Talmud in Sota says, ego is equivalent to actual idolatry. Raising, inflating your own ego is literally like serving idols. Idol worship. Why? Because essentially what you're doing is in your own little life, you're serving idols. It's so much about you and less about godliness in the world. So to summarize, Kochi ba'otzem yadi asal li yisachai lazeh. Yeah, that's another quote from one of the parshas in Devarim. That when a person says Kochi ba'otzem yadi asal li yisachai lazeh, that my own personal feats of strength are what have created the goodness and the success in my life. Again, it's the same context. Again, it's pushing God out. So to summarize, our battle throughout our lives is to make our own lives, our hearts, our minds, our physical lives, our spiritual lives, our relationships, make those lives a little less meful and a little less otherful. Because when we submit ourselves and we deflate our egos even just a little bit, it's a space where godliness is allowed in. And that, my friends, right, just as I know we spent a lot of time this last, I didn't intend for it to go that direction. We spent a lot of time focusing on the negative. Let's take a moment to focus on the positive. The Gemara says, "Mesaymin b'tov," that we should always end off a lesson, end off a conversation with good. When we do the right thing, when we're faced with that choice and that challenge, and we're actually able to really get angry, and we choose not to get angry, right? We get angry because you pissed me off, you ruined me, you got in the way of me. Right? That's usually what anger is about, at a certain level, right? Whatever it is. If it's in a relationship, it's because you're not doing what I want, or you're not, whatever, right? It's all about something of me is not being fulfilled. When we're faced with that choice, that challenge, that we could do that, and we choose instead to say, you know what? I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to say, this little conversation, and this little moment in our relationship, I'm going to be selfless. It's not about me. It's about you. And I'm going to find some way, right? Or in our relationship with Hashem. It's not about us, it's about Hashem. And therefore we choose to give up of our own ego, of our own self, the space within our own lives for Hashem. That causes the exact opposite of everything we discussed in this lesson. That causes an infinite pleasure to God. And that's how the second one of the 10 Commandments, so back up. Just as the first one of the 10 Commandments, every time we do a mitzvah, we do a positive commandment, we do a do, right? We keep Shabbos, we eat kosher, we whatever it is, we do it. What are we do? Or we're in relationships or whatever it is. We essentially prove God's existence in the world more. The fact that the world is God, the fact that the world is God. And the opposite, right? Whenever we don't do or don't, in other words, whenever we, as just like not serving idolatry, right? Whenever we choose, we have that choice to do that, to be more of ourselves and more denying the existence of God. What's the title of the lesson? More to deny that God is within us, and instead we choose to allow God into our lives and to recognize the godliness within ourselves and within the world. That causes an infinite pleasure to God. And that's how the first one of the 10 Commandments is essentially has included within it all of the positive commandments. And the second of the 10 Commandments essentially has included within it all of the negative commandments. And with this we'll conclude Jewish mysticism lessons in Tanya, chapter 22, denying that God is within you.